This time on Jarosival, I ponder the reason why video game weapons are always so huge and heavy. This time on Jarosival, I build the big, giant, magical, nonsensical Blades of Chaos from God of War. And they're gonna fly, and I'm gonna use them. But they won't have any magic in them. It's time to go shopping. I need to go to a few specialty places to pick up the stuff that I need to be able to make these, like aluminum plate and steel plate and tubes and chain. Come on. I didn't leave my lights on this time. So the idea was to weld the aluminum to the steel. And if you know anything about welding, you know that's not possible. So I went to a welding shop because I read online that you can apply silver solder to the surface of steel, which will bond with steel. 85,000 PSI tensile strength when you do that. And then you can weld the aluminum to the silver solder. So you can weld aluminum to steel, but it's a process. Now that would make this really easy. Problem is to get a container of silver solder for steel, it's about $200. So that is out of the budget, because with the amount that I would probably screw up trying to do a brand new process like this and try to get it to work right, I'd probably go through a fair amount of that. I'm not about to burn up $400 worth of solder for nothing. So change of plans. We're at the metal get in place now, and it's time to make the decision on whether I'm going to use steel or aluminum for the chain. I have to make the chain if I do aluminum, and it'll be lightweight, so I'll have to man up and do that, or I'll have to man up and use heavier chain, which is steel. And I couldn't make the decision, so I asked my followers on Instagram, which you could be one too, at Jarosival, and help me make these decisions for my projects. 33% aluminum to 67% steel. So I'm not buying aluminum, but I need to get the rest of the stuff for the swords.
Yeah, that's 14.
Yeah, if that's 2 feet, you can just cut me a 15-inch piece off of that.
Okay.
Yeah, this'll work. Metal. Metal. I want the lightest, coolest looking chain. I'm thinking this. You want to cut me like a 10-foot section and I can take it out in the parking lot, swing it around, see how hard it is? But then there's going to be a sword on the end of it. That's not like heavy, but that's heavy enough that's going to be difficult to swing around. One on each arm. That looks pretty accurate. So here's the thing. I don't know what the weight of this chain is, but I can do a little math, and this is quarter, and the other chain that I'm considering is 5/16. 5/16. With a little bit of math, you can figure out what the area is of the circle that's a quarter or 5/16 around, and then the difference in that area would equate to the difference in weight, because then you have the difference in mass. Roughly, that chain's gonna weigh 50% more than this one, and it doesn't look that much different, so I'm gonna go with this one. Problem is, they don't have enough of it. It would be wonderful to use the smaller chain, but it's gonna be expensive to get that at the other place, because this chain get in place is cheap. I'm gonna go with the bigger size and just man up even more and use 50% heavier chain. Definitely isn't gonna break. This stuff's rated for 2,000 pounds. So that's probably about 7 feet. I need 2 of those. Yeah, so that'd be 26 feet. Now that I have all of my supplies, I want to explain to you how I'm going to make these things fly blade first all the time, just like they do in the video game. Let's discuss some physics. Rocket science. You're probably wondering, what could rocket science possibly have to do with spinning swords around on the ends of chains? Well, it has everything to do with it. It's just like the string test that you do on a model rocket to make sure that it's going to have stable flight. This is a relatively simple principle that I explained at length in my Iron Man rocket launcher build series. Basically, you need to know where your center of mass is on the object and where your center of drag is on the object. So for this, the center of mass is about right here because that's where it balances. And then the center of drag you can find by basically pretending this is a wind vane. And if I blew on the side of it and there was an attachment point where it could swivel, if that point is too far to the front, it would turn towards me. If it was too far to the back, it would turn towards me this way. But if it's right at the center of drag, it will stay sideways. No amount of force will make it turn either direction. That's your center of drag. Now, depending on how far apart those 2 points are, if you have your center of mass way in front of your center of drag, that'll give you much more stable flight. What does this have to do with the swords? Well, if I can get all of the mass at the blade on the sword and have all of the drag from the rest of the sword behind it, and then it's got that swivel point of the chain, when I spin it around, it's just like string testing a model rocket to make sure that it'll have stable flight. And I should be able to spin it around and it will travel blade first all the time, and I'll be able to use it just like the God of War does. Physics. These are the chains that are wrapped around Kratos' arm and connect to the sword. And these chains are 5/16 rod thick, which is too big for my welder to handle. So it's time to go to a friend's house who has a more powerful welder to make the foundation of this thing. You may have noticed that my work table looks drastically different from last time. That's because there was epoxy resin on the surface of the table, and that was hard to stick my Patreon names to. And then once they were stuck, it was hard to remove them. So I upgraded. Now it's covered with a piece of painted steel, which was also a perfect opportunity for me to make a change in the names because the table was getting full rapidly. So now $1 will still get you access to everything on my Patreon, but I felt that the people that are donating more deserved recognition for that, which is why we now have nuclear green names on the table, as well as the white and gold. If you want to be a Patreon supporter of this channel, the link is in the description. Now I've got the power of a 210 MIG welder, but I gotta throw together a little form first for my arm because obviously I can't weld the chain while it's wrapped around my arm.
Once attached, the chains remained so, chained and seared to the flesh, a part of the bearer's body.
That would be a bad idea. But I think I've got an easy way to make this work. I'm gonna use this cardboard, and then I searched around for some containers that fit. I can just barely get my hand through this one. And then this one fits on my upper arm. So if I get my distance and put the cardboard between the two cups, then I'll have a form that I can fit my hand through the chain, but it'll still fit on my arm. If I put this thing on, I want it to go from the top of my forearm to my wrist. It's about 9 inches. This doesn't have to be crazy exact because it's chain. It's not solid like this, you know? There's gonna be links that are pushing into my arm a little bit and other ones won't be. If it was smooth and it was a little too tight, I wouldn't be able to get it on because I would have to compress my whole arm, which, you know, isn't really gonna happen. But since it's chain, it'll be fine. Obviously, this stuff can melt / catch on fire, so I'm gonna try to mitigate that by covering it in some good old aluminum foil. I wouldn't say fireproof, but that's better than bare cardboard. I stripped a piece of wire to tie this together so I can get my first weld on because I'm not gonna hold this in place with my fingers. It's got gas. Here goes nothing. Now I can pull this little jobby off. Oh yeah. Now I just need all these little buggers to hold their shape. You know, there's 4 points that I could weld. I could weld here and on the other side and then on both sides of it. Obviously, I want to weld on the inside of it. That way you can't see the welds, but I can't get to it with this form here. So I'm going to tack the sides to get it to hold its shape first. The way the chains are wrapped around Kratos' arm is not just a coil like this, it's kind of random. It looks like it goes back and forth. Some of it doesn't make sense, but in order to make mine look similar to that, now that I have this coil up the arm, I'm going to go back down to where I can hold this where I started from, and I'll go the opposite direction to make it look a little more random. So I just need to get that part, but my main structure is done. So I'm gonna weld this at the front to the main structure, and then I can just zap all the other ones without having to try to adjust the chain. Actually, with that in place, now I can take the inside thing out and just zap all of them from the inside. That way you can't see those welds. I'm out of wire. My buddy told me there wasn't much wire in the machine and I could use up the last of it. Well, I did. Guess I gotta TIG it from here on out. This is gonna be tedious. I was hoping the MIG welder would last out so that I could reinforce all of these weld joints by putting another spot on them on the inside now that the form's out of there, but I'm gonna have to do it with TIG. So this is gonna take some time. It's done, and so is the other one. Now it's time to see if I can swing these things around. Let's see if yes! Oh, that has a huge amount of momentum. That's kind of crazy. I don't know how it's gonna be with the sword on the end of it. It does feel pretty cool. Obviously, I'm gonna have to be a lot more cautious when there's giant swords, knives on the end of this thing. I do feel like I could do some damage though. The hills are alive with the sound of music. That's pretty cool that I can get them to fly like that. If I can do that with the swords on, that'll be awesome because I'll be able to like double chop a watermelon. All right, they're heavy. I'm gonna take them off. These are done, but they don't look right because the chain is all shiny, and then that's got all the messed upness from being welded on. And I probably should have done this first because you're supposed to get this coating off before you weld it together, but this isn't gonna be under any force, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna acid dip these, and you could do this in vinegar, and that's not dangerous at all. And it'll eventually take this stuff off in a couple of days, but I'm impatient, so I'm gonna use hydrochloric acid. When you do this, hydrochloric acid gives off chlorine gas. That's why I have this respirator on, and these very expensive yellow filters will filter out the stuff that kills you when you do this. And I'm outside, being very safe. If you don't have all this stuff, don't do this. Just use vinegar and take your time. But when I put this in, it's gonna burn this stuff off and make it clean in like 10 seconds. And this is diluted. When you buy muriatic acid at the store, which contains hydrochloric acid, it's 35% hydrochloric acid. That's definitely been diluted by 2, if not 3 times. So it's still going to be far more violent than you might imagine. Here we go.
There it goes. See this mist? That will make you be dead. Clean.
To neutralize this, I just have baking soda mixed with water in this bucket. You dump it in there, instantly neutralizes the acid. And once this has been dunked in the baking soda solution, which is basic, not acidic, it's safe to handle because all of the acid is gone. Now I'm just gonna do the rest of the chain, and I'll do the other one, and I'll have perfectly clean, awesome looking, more accurate to the game chain gauntlets, and yeah, these things.
Clean.
And now they're done. Almost. They still need a coat of matte clear coat so that they don't rust like crazy. But this is just the beginning. Next Sunday, I gotta make this part, you know? The actual sword that goes on it. And I need to have a way to make it using rocket science that the blade flies the way you want it to all the time. But there's like 30 versions of this thing, and the scaling of it is kind of insane. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so that you can see the continuation of this build next Sunday. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.